Hello, good evening. Welcome, everybody. Very late evening to Canada and good morning to wherever else you are in the world. We are at Kanban, New Zealand here, and today we've got Pip Bennington, who is having a real-life case study. I'm super excited about that, about a campaigns team, so non-IT case study at Loyalty in New Zealand. And Pip was one of the first, I think, that came to my classes in New Zealand, one of the first, even when I was starting with Kanban, to mirror me. So I'm really excited to have her here today. For those who are new to Kanban New Zealand, you can find the recordings on the Kanban New Zealand YouTube channel, most of the recordings that we've had. So have a look there. There are some pretty good talks from the past. And we do this together with the meetup groups in Sydney and Melbourne. And that's Dan here, who's running those. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everyone definitely from Melbourne and Sydney, all around Australia. And we'll maybe at the end, you can see here, I've got my Kanban Australia logo here. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up at Kanban Australia. So that's the conference that we've started up last year. It's running again next year. So we'll keep you posted.
Mm-hmm. If you have questions along the way, Pip will pause a few times and ask if there are questions. If you have any along the way you really want to ask, you can raise your hand. So we are quite easygoing, or if you feel more comfortable putting them in the chat, you can do that as well, and we keep an eye there as well. And for the tricky questions, we might then take them to the end. We can have a chat at the end as well, Q&A, and for those who like to hang in and just have a bit of a chat because we all know each other almost here, then that's an opportunity too. Cool. Over to Pip.
Thanks, Silke. So from the first moment I encountered Kanban, I have asked myself this question. Yeah, but how? How do you actually apply the principles and the practices that you learn? How do you actually start with a team? So the training makes it sound pretty easy. And to be fair, it's not hard. You start with a static session to establish a workflow, and you gain some buy-in from all of the team. But what happens when you observe a team and you recognize that Kanban can definitely help them, but when their response to your questions is comments like, well, we've already got a workflow. We already know what to do. Or better yet, that's an agile thing. We're not software. So this was the scenario I found myself in when I started working with one of our marketing campaign groups at Loyalty New Zealand. I started with Loyalty New Zealand. I'm in my third year. And what I noticed when I got to Loyalty New Zealand was that we were pretty onto it when it came to Agile with our data and analytics and our technology teams, but our campaigns team and our business operations teams weren't quite settling in there. And I always wondered if there was a way that I would be able to kind of introduce them to the wonders that was Kanban. And so what I found was that there's this skill and capability to influencing the right people to try something new. And when it came to trying Kanban, in my first 6 months at Loyalty, I didn't have the right capability or skill to convince them to say yes. But what I did have was this complete conviction that Kanban could help them. So without anybody saying yes to trying Kanban, I applied the principles and practices of Kanban anyway. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through what I did and where we are at today. So I want you to imagine that instead of sitting with your regular IT teams, you're sitting next to the business. And the business team that you're sitting with is responsible for delivering marketing campaigns. And this is effectively knowledge work. The majority of work that they do is held inside the brilliance that is their own minds. And by sitting and listening and talking to this team, you observe some things. They're not that happy. you've got a group of analysts, a group of campaign owners, and a group and a marketing deployment team. They're split across 2 geographic locations, 3 at times. Together, they all contribute to the delivery of campaigns, and they all feel very overburdened with their work. They are juggling thousands of tasks in many different digital tools. Tasks are assigned by hours of work, and the workflow tasks that they're using haven't been reassessed in over 3 years. Nobody's looked at what they're doing in over 3 years to determine if that's correct. And people are being assigned up to 12 hours of work for a day. At the same time, there's an in-flight project going on to create them a new process to deliver campaigns using a new system. And that means they're going to have one system for delivering what we call standard campaigns, and they're going to be delivering bespoke campaigns during their old system. As I mentioned, they're using multiple tools to juggle all of this work. So they've got a scheduling tool, which works for distributing their hours of work. They're using Jira for managing their campaign tickets with their campaign owners. They've got a spreadsheet for planning. Well, I'll be honest, there's more than one spreadsheet, and I stopped counting after about 4. They're using Word and SharePoint for storing their briefing files, and their documentation is kind of dribbed and drabbed across Confluence. And also, like most organizations, there's little to no budget to change things that they feel are already working. But what they did have was a very flexible environment and a willingness to adapt. They were open to trying something new. They just weren't open to saying, yay, let's do Kanban, or let's try Kanban. Thanks to their in-flight project, they actually already had a clear and well-documented process that they needed to work through for delivering campaigns. And they were extremely open-minded. This is a group of people that have quite a growth mindset. And they also had a very, yes.
We are still seeing the first slide. Is that intended?
Yep.
Cool.
Sorry, my bad. We're still on the first slide. Sorry.
Cool.
They do have a desire to replace their scheduling tool. That was the burble. That was the burble. So that was the situation that I was in. Those were the things that I was observing. There was a lot of problems, a lot of issues, but at the same time, this was a flexible environment, and they were open to a level of change. And my thought was that, my God, the Kanban principles and practices could help these groups build a system for the delivery of campaigns, to build a system of work that would contain these campaigns. And I was utterly convinced that Kanban could help them. But what do you do when there's no Kanban buy-in? Buy-in should be the first step, followed by static. So I had a willingness to change, but not necessarily a willingness to try a whole new method. And I didn't have the experience to convince them to, let's just try Kanban. Could I do it anyway? Kanban's a method. Methods can be applied to anything. So could the Kanban method help me to help this group? Oh, I'm an agile coach. I'm just going to do it anyway. So without anybody saying yes, I just went ahead. So I started with the first 2 principles of Kanban. I set about starting to understand what they did today. What were their current processes? What roles did they have? What were their responsibilities? What were their job titles? And I asked curious questions. Could you just tell me how that happens? Is there another way that we could do that? Why do you do it like that? Wouldn't it be easier if everything was in the same place? Have you considered trying? And by this time, I was about 9 months into loyalty, and I had built a level of trust. And so what I found was people were willing to try some of the little experiments. So I like to think I successfully applied those first 2 principles. So normally you would start with your static. I didn't have a static, but I had some unhappy people. So what we did was I managed to convince the leadership or get the leadership on board that the first step in supporting this group of unhappy people would be to improve the environment. And the first thing to do would be to get everybody together in one location. Now, this was not quick. It took about 3 months for me to get everybody together. It was about 24 people. And we ran one day of workshops. And I had 2 things that I wanted to achieve in that workshop. The first thing I wanted to do was to help them feel like one team, to help them see that they all contributed to what we were calling the campaign delivery process, and that without each team and each capability, they couldn't be successful. And then I wanted them to be able to see themselves and their capabilities inside that campaign delivery process. But I wanted them to be able to see it. I just have to flick to a different set of notes. I wanted them to understand and agree that the campaign delivery process that they had was the right one, that it had everything that they needed, and that it had were there areas that were or were not working. So it wasn't a static, but it was almost like for me a refresh of a static. And when we got to the end of that workshop, we had trust in the group. They renamed themselves. They renamed themselves from, as they called themselves, the LIM team, the Loyalty Insights Marketing team. And they all agreed that the process they had would work for everything. So that was great. So I was very happy at that point. What did this process look like? So this is a high-level view of the end-to-end campaign process. Here's my little airplane/robot as it enters, and it goes through some major stages, and various things happen during this process. And out of the workshops, we also got what their high-level tasks were, all the steps involved in completing each one of these phases. So we had some bespoke campaigns. These were campaigns that were going to be delivered using their old system, their old platform. And we had their standard campaigns, which were going to be delivered using the new system. So what, for me, was the next step? What was the next thing I was going to try to help them and work through this? So the next thing I did was, well, we've got some in-flight things. We've got a workflow. Let's visualize it. So now I got to apply my favorite practice, which is visualize the workflow. So this team was using 4 tools, right? Okay, 6 if you count Excel and Word. So we also had a secondary in-flight project, which was to migrate them off their scheduling tool onto something different. So what I said was, well, hey, we're already using this other tool called Jira. What if we migrate off your scheduling tool onto Jira? Then everything is in one place. And so that was a relatively small thing. That was an easy thing for them to say yes to. So we went ahead with that. Now, there are any number of tools that you can use for Kanban, and I will be the first person to say that Jira is not the best, but it was the tool we had. And it was also the tool that they were kind of familiar with. It wasn't a brand new pair of shoes that had a 4-inch heel. It wasn't a comfy old shoe with holes in it that was going to get you water outside. It was kind of somewhere in between. So our analysts were using the scheduling tool. They were very keen to get rid of it. They were happy to jump in and try Jira. Our deployment team was using Jira, Asana, and Trello. And our campaign owners were using Jira, the scheduling tool, Excel, Word, and I just stopped at that point. So to help visualize this workflow, what I did is I applied some principles from Kanban. So I applied the principles of understanding and focusing on the customer's needs and expectations. So I just kept asking them, what does the campaign need? Manage the work, let the workers self-organize around it. I just encouraged them to tell me how they worked, and then we crafted Jira to reflect that. I was helping them focus on the work and to organize around it. Now, each tool that they were using had a distinct purpose, but the system of tools had not been looked at as a whole in a really long time, about 3 years, as I said. So the first tool, their scheduling tool, they would enter a campaign, or a campaign would be entered. Each campaign comprised of 12 or more steps. Some of the steps were critical, some of them were time sensitive. The tasks hadn't been updated. It didn't incorporate to the new process. They were creating ad hoc tasks because the ones that were there weren't necessarily valid for them. And it was very much a first in, first serve to get the tasks in and assigned to a person, because the only way the scheduling tool operated was a task needed to be assigned to a person. The scheduling tool was not capable of giving a view of the end-to-end system for a campaign. Good old Jira. Jira was being used to capture every campaign they created. Unfortunately, they had 3 columns: to do, in progress, and done. And the to do column, I think when I started looking at it, it had about 900 cards. It was quite a behemoth. So the CEOs would generate a campaign in the scheduling tool. The scheduling tool would create a unique identifier. They would take that unique identifier and create a network folder for all of their files, and then they would store that unique identifier inside a custom field in Jira. So much wastage. But the Jira board generated a calendar which they populated with due dates. This was a requirement for our MAD team, or our deployments team. So the deployment team would receive a notification from Jira that a new ticket had been created, and then they would go off to, I think it was Asana, and create a ticket there, and then create one in Trello, and they needed it was very crazy. And so what we used with trying to understand and focus their needs was work out what each one of them needed to use the tool for, and then bring it all together. Encouraging acts of leadership at all levels. Principle 3. The focus here was to get everybody talking and discussing what they needed, and to talk about what was or wasn't working. So the scheduling tool was creating unnecessary stress by quantifying the hours that a task needed to be completed. And because it was a scheduling tool by person, there was no end-to-end views. So the people got together and decided, well, it doesn't actually matter how long something takes, as long as we hit key dates. So they agreed to give up the scheduling. They agreed to give up the hours, because they always hit the dates. So what would happen is, if there were 10 tasks, those tasks would be assigned a number of hours and then spread over a particular set of days. And in some cases, those tasks were assigned in such a way that a person would have 12, sometimes 13 hours of work. So it was really good for looking at the volume of activity, but not very good for understanding what really needed to be done next. So we took all of that and we applied. We undertook some regular actions. So we cleaned up Jira, got rid of the 1,000 tickets that had been completed but not marked as resolved, got rid of the 600 tickets that were sitting in to do, got rid of the 900 tickets that were sitting in progress, and came down to this nice, comfortable feature of there only being about 20 or 30 active campaigns at any one time. So we built them a prototype environment. We built them a Jira project that reflected their process, their new process, and its high-level flow. And all of the time we spent clearing up their tickets allowed us to determine that there were just a few key types of work. There was a campaign, there was an analytics request, and there was a creative request. We then determined the key subtasks to deliver to this based on the new process. We tested the prototype. We went through several iterations of what it looked like. We implemented the recommended changes. And once they were 80% comfortable, and it was 80%, they weren't 100%. Once they were 80% comfortable, we started incrementally migrating the work from the scheduling tool into Jira to fully verify that things would work for them. So, what are our next two practices of Kanban that we were able to apply? Look at things. Manage the flow and make policies explicit. So we got to daily stand-ups. So for the first time, they were having a daily stand-up just to look at the work that was in flow at that point in time. They no longer had a board with 1,000 tickets on it that they were trying to work through. They had a single screen that just looked at the work that they had in flight. We created places inside Jira linked to Confluence for them to be able to record their policies around how they were working. And then we reviewed it at a series of retros. So we tried some things, we would have a retro. Is it working? Is it not working? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And we again encourage those acts of leadership by saying, if you don't like it, why don't you talk to the others and see if that also doesn't work for them? Maybe there's a little change that we can make to improve things. Practice number 4, improve collaboratively. So version 0 of their workflow, as I said, was to do, in progress, and done. Version 1 of their workflow was pipeline, to do, in progress, post-deployment, and done. Version 2 had a few more fields in there. And version 3, which is the version they're currently working off, maps almost directly to their high-level process. As soon as you see their high-level process, it was very easy to work out what those stage gates, what that workflow was. But they weren't comfortable with it at that stage. They had to go through the process. They had to improve incrementally. They had to try it so that they could reach the point where they were comfortable and ready to use the workflow that did in fact map to their process. So that was where we got to, which was great. Feedback loops, practice 5. The process of going through and looking at where they were at helped us solidify the feedback loops. I didn't have to directly apply and recommend anything. All I had to do was really reiterate the purpose and the intention of each session. So let's start with that daily stand-up. So they were having a daily stand-up to talk about the work that was in flight. And out of that daily stand-up, there would be information and detail that would flow back and forth to their weekly meetings. And so you will see the replenishment meeting was becoming their weekly IA meeting. So weekly, this particular group would get together and talk about what was coming up and what they needed to work on next. The weekly CO meeting, which was their delivery, is a mapping to their delivery planning meeting. So this is the owners of the work saying, this is the order and this is how we need to have things done. The weekly CO or delivery planning, less of a risk review, but that feeds and took a flow from our marketing review session. So this is where the marketing team would get together monthly and look at what was coming up, what was at risk, what clients they needed to talk to, what direction did that things need to go in. And then the replenishment meeting was also fed through to tertile planning. Tertile planning is loyalty's version of big room planning or PI planning. So every 4 months, we go through a planning cycle. And as part of that planning cycle, it starts with strategic review. We don't have, or I haven't identified an operations review feedback loop, but what we do have is a direct feed from tertile planning through to the marketing review sessions. So again, all I had to do was reiterate the intention and the purpose so that they could have really good, clear conversations. Hey Pip, what about work in process? I won't lie, this was just the hardest, but we got there. So currently, work in process is limited based on the number of people and the number of subtasks. So one subtask plus one QA per day for an IA or for a person. So the analysts, the IAs, can pull the subtasks and complete them as soon as they are ready to build. And as a data and analytics organization, we're simply allowing the data or the work that's already flowed through the board to predict what our work in process number should be, or how many tasks a capability level or person may be able to handle. One of the really important yes.
Sorry. I just thought there is a question in the chat, and I thought I interrupt because it is actually with relation to the feedback loops. Ziggy from Agile Oakland is asking, we have a lot of teams and marketing teams have meetings. A lot of teams and marketing teams have meetings. How do we pull those meetings into Kanban? Did you resolve that?
Sorry. Hiya.
Hey.
My typing's terrible, so it makes no sense, the question. We have a lot of what they call WIP meetings where they go and talk to agencies in our marketing teams. How do you kind of like pull them into that feedback loop? Sorry, I might have stopped your thrust of it.
No, you've totally halted me, but it's okay. So I'm the particular team in question that I was working with is one of many. Or is one of two teams. So this team services or responds to requests from a number of clients. That client number is somewhere between, let's just call it 20. And those 20 clients each have a account director or a business director associated with them. And I think we have 4 account directors. Each account director is responsible for a set of clients, and those clients generate campaigns. So not only do our clients compete in a way for our attention and our capability, but our account directors or business directors also compete because they want the best that is for their client. So the way that we are trying to do it is simply by exposing and making them look at and see the visual flow and the volume of work and effort that is in the system at any one time. This is the power of visualize the workflow. I've said it before, Jira is not the best tool, right? So Jira is not a scheduling tool, but with some of the advanced add-ons, we've been able to bring a level of that capability in. What's really important is understanding how long a campaign takes and what types of campaigns. So we went through an exercise of understanding our language and understanding the complexity of campaigns. So we have really high level, we've got a simple campaign, a standard campaign, and a complex campaign. Each one of those campaigns has a scheduled set of days. You might call it I don't want to say a cycle time. It has a length of time. So we might, for example, allow 6 weeks for a complex campaign, 4 weeks for a standard campaign, and maybe 2 weeks for a simple campaign. And then there is the series of subtasks that those campaigns take. If we take, and we will actually get to this in a couple of slides. But what we had to do was put the full volume of downstream activity, the campaigns that are in flight at the moment, and then show our account and business directors that volume and help them understand what the impact was of adding in another campaign. What was our measuring your throughput, like how many campaigns can we deliver or deploy in a period, right? Can you get through 10 in 2 weeks? Can you get through 20 in 2 weeks? And that starts to form a pipeline into our downstream activity. So what we did was we visualized the work, and then we took that back to our marketing teams, back to our account directors, and showed them the volume and showed them what the impact was of something else coming in. Does that answer your question slightly, Ziggy?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for hijacking and taking your train of thought away. I do apologize.
I love a good hijack. We're running.
While we're hijacking,
Sure.
can I ask a question about how you set the limits? Because one subtask is like a Jira subtask. What does the rest mean? Does that mean one per person? Or is it something more complicated than that?
On subtask. Let me.
Where it says QA per IA, I'm not sure what the terminology is.
Let me flick to the next slide.
All right.
So this is a snapshot. So I've just taken a little screen dump. So our stand-ups, the daily stand-up focuses on the next 7 days. And what we have is, you can see we have a column which is testing and QA, and we have a column that says ready for testing and QA. So the IA, when the ticket is ready for QA, it will be moved into ready for QA, and then an IA can then pull that task into the testing and QA column and get it done. And so what we say is that for any one day, a person can be assigned one subtask plus one thing in the testing and QA column. Does that make it clear?
Kind of. I'm just wondering, does that encourage people to work together, or is it one person, one task? Like if you experimented with kind of pair programming, even though there's no programming here, getting 2 brains on one task, solve the problem.
Remembering that this team or this group came from an environment where things were scheduled by hours, what they enjoyed was the flexibility of knowing that something just needed to hit its due date, and they had the flexibility to complete it any time leading up to that period. They still collaborate and they still work together to get things done. It's just that there is a primary assignee to things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Work in progress is difficult, because with an environment like campaigns are revenue generating. Nobody likes to say no, or could you wait, to something that is revenue generating. So we are trying to find the balance between, we're not saying no, we're just being clear about our lead time. Our lead time to get a standard campaign over the line is 2 weeks. If you can sign everything off and have the requirements ready in 2 weeks, we can guarantee a deployment and a response in 4 weeks. And there is a challenge beyond that. So we had an added bonus of the work that we did. And the added bonus was the clarification of upstream activity. So I mentioned that we went through a series of workshops to agree some language that we were using. And thanks to that language, we were able to clarify all of the work and effort involved in engaging with a client and building a brief to the point where it could enter the campaign delivery process. And we were able to help them understand that this was what we considered upstream activity. Today, this work is captured in a series of spreadsheets and other tools. And a advanced goal of mine is for them to be able to visualize that the workflow of their upstream activity, so that they can also see the advanced impact of what happens when it hits our downstream delivery process. So work in progress, and how to have that conversation with our marketing teams. If they were using the same form of visualization, if everything was in a single digital tool, they would be able to clearly see the impact of what happened when 1, 2, or more than normal number of campaigns entered our campaign delivery process. How successful was this method? How successful was I at using Kanban to apply Kanban? The biggest success was that people enjoy the environment more. The biggest success was that people stopped feeling so overwhelmed and overburdened by having this single visualization for them. So we managed to get visibility of campaigns. We've got traceability of campaigns. We've got better ticket quality about what's happening with our campaigns. And everybody who's involved in the campaign delivery process is using a single system. And only last week, the legal team popped up and went, we need some information because we need to approve a portion of this. How do we get involved? So now you've got people from outside of the process going, oh, that's working. I want to participate, which is fantastic. We've got a clear and singular process for campaign delivery process. And we've got clear and agreed tasks. And we've got a clear and agreed pathway for those tasks. We've got daily stand-ups, more ownerships for the people who are involved, more pride in their work. We're getting more work through the system, and we have a single source of truth. We have one place that people now go to seek whatever other information that they need, whether it's who worked on it last, why it's not in a particular state. And people who are not familiar with campaigns can look at and read the board and have a level of understanding about what is happening with the campaign. And that's the key to visualization, right? Is that even if you don't do campaigns, because I don't do campaigns, I can look at this board and I can read it and I can start to work out where things are and what the volume is and who's overburdened. My learnings. Oh, my learnings. The importance of one team, the importance of people and people buy-in is the most critical thing. But that also needs one culture. So if you have a clash of cultures, you will have difficulties. Call it out early, and just keep repeating those differences. Keep repeating where there is a clash. Keep repeating where one set has a different set of values to another. We are very fortunate at Loyalty in that we have a values-based environment. We have 4 values, and some of those values are be daring, be realistic. And we were able to use that core set of values to kind of bring people into the conversation and kind of tie them together. The clash of cultures made it very difficult to see the system of work. And so there was a lot of reminding and telling people about the system of work, and how what they have done or what they have created has contributed to building that system of work. So helping them see the campaign delivery process and what we have created as its own system rather than a process they just blindly follow is a journey I might still be on. But I am many steps closer today than I was 6 months ago. Flow metrics. There is an importance in being able to determine and tell the journey that you're on and tell the story that you're at. And I said it before, but I'll say it again, Jira is not the best tool. And I spend a massive amount of time manually pulling the flow metrics out of Jira. And you can definitely add that to the things I dislike about Jira. But I don't have the money for the add-ons that would allow these calculations to happen automatically just yet. So the focus has always been on the work in progress. Have a clear number so people know what they can measure themselves against and what they can get through, and they can stop being quite so overwhelmed. And they have the power of being able to go, no, we have too much work. And throughput, how many things have we done over what period of time has been important. That's an important metric for being able to show that we've been on a journey of improvement. Working with Jira, I've had to use different reporting, I've had to use different things, and I'm constantly trying to use the default things that live in Jira to continue to tell our story of success. So, yeah. So I will say, if you don't know where to start, just apply Kanban. It actually worked. It worked for me. It helped me get from a place where I knew that the method of Kanban could help them, but I didn't quite know where to start. So I applied Kanban and I had some successes. So I answered my own question of, yeah, but how? By using and applying Kanban. Yeah. So I will stop sharing and ask, do you have any questions, or do you have any observations or thoughts that you would like to share?
Pip.
I am expecting one from everyone. Thanks. Yes, Silke?
Yeah, sorry. I have to hijack this because I was so onto this. I totally forgot to take screenshots. Could you please share at least the last slide again for me?
Please, one moment, caller. Do you have it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
So I can see David is raising his hand. What is there?
Ah, all right.
Is there
David.
I was just clapping, but happy to comment on the clap. The clap was the perseverance for using Jira and actually getting enough of it to work for you. So well done, you, for persevering.
Thanks.
Was sort of what I was thinking about. So great effort.
Thanks. Thanks. We all feel the pain of the Jira. Yeah.
I had a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As you were there for a little while, did you notice any changes in engagement scores for the group that you were working with? Because quite often that's a telling sign as well when teams start to feel better like that. Whereas that's not something
That's
you've got
interesting.
access to.
I have not gathered that, and it's very easy for me to gather that because we do an engagement survey every tertile. So I will have the last 3 or 4 to go back and review and look. So I have not done that, but that's a great thing for me to go back and do. So I'm going to write a note now.
So I did some experience in a marketing team. I was working with one last year or the year before for a few months, and one of the managers there said, "Oh, it'd be so much easier if we did like the agency style where we track everything by hours." And I said to him, "What do you think that'll do to your engagement score?" And he says, "Well, yeah, okay, that's probably going to kill it. Yeah, okay, let's not do that." So, that's why we continue down the Kanban path, because a lot of people in marketing have been in those agencies, and those agencies can be pretty horrific for people engagement, and a lot of management is driven. One of their key KPIs is the engagement of their people, and Kanban can help the senior managers with that, I think, if you look at your numbers.
Yeah. I'm going to go back and dig those out. I think they're going to be very helpful. That was that clash of culture that we experience, is that our data and analytics and technology is extremely agile, and we have that agency mentality with our marketing, in our marketing area.
Yeah.
Not as rigid as it would be, because they're pretty cool people, but it is still slightly there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy's raising his hand next.
Thanks for offering that back to us and for remembering the pieces along the way, because by the end, sometimes we're a little bit traumatized and forget. I'm curious if you could wave a magic wand and skip over one of your steps. Which piece would you like to just magically be solved for you along the way that you wouldn't have to do manually or do yourself through sheer grit?
Which practice or principle, or which action that I undertook?
Which anything along your journey of change with the organization?
It would come back to the culture. I would like that culture shift to happen faster, and I would like that buy-in to happen earlier, because as soon as you've worked in Kanban, you know how successful and how good it is, but helping people understand and see that and getting their buy-in so they'll try it, so hard.
And Serge, or Serge, not sure if you pronounce yourself in a French way or in an English way.
Well, it depends to whom I'm talking, but usually Serge is my name. And that's how my mother calls me. But of course, in an English environment, Serge is probably easier. Pip, thank you very much for your presentation. I love to see Kanban applied to, like environments outside of software development. It's always a pleasure to see that there are so many applications. I have a couple of questions, a big hijacking here. But the first one would be, at the beginning, did you measure a baseline to see the state of the system at the start, just to see what improvements could be measured?
No, I did not. I should have done that, but I did not, because we were taking small incremental steps. So we have a record. We can go back and we go, this is how much work they had on at this point in time. This is how many tasks they had. And when we attempted to gather that information, thanks, John, when we attempted to gather that information out of their scheduling tool to measure, like, what was the volume of work they had there in the system, it was incalculable. There was so much, and it was so erratic, and it was so freaking all over the place. I had no clue. I couldn't get it. And when we initially started working in Jira, like I say, there was over 1,500, almost 2,000 unresolved old tickets that we had to shed. So in many ways, we had to gut and clear out the old stuff and then measure from there. So we've been running clean for about 150 days.
Okay, so from the moment you started measuring the lead or cycle time, for example, what improvement did you see until now in terms of cycle time, for example?
That's where we're in the date-driven land of scheduling. So it's less for us. It is difficult to measure the amount of time it takes for a ticket to roll through a system, because it's all about hitting key dates, and we want to pull the work just before we complete it. So what we measure ourselves on is how successful are we, or how often do we hit the date that we said we were going to hit. And what we found is that previously in the old system, we about 70% of the time, and in the new system that we're running at about 95%.
Wow. Another question, if if I'm allowed, I have many questions, but if you guys have other questions before me, you can go ahead.
Go ahead. I've got Anthony next to us in the chat.
Okay, my next question would be about the policies, the practice number 3, like make policies explicit. What kind of policies did you make explicit? Any definition of done or stuff like that?
Yes. So we started with things like how we were going to behave at stand up. We will be open. We will be honest. We will push back when we need to push back. Everybody will talk. And then we got into things like, well, at stand up, we don't need to discuss this kind of work. We only need to discuss this other kind of work. And so our policies, we started with the policies around stand up. And once people were comfortable with the idea that it was okay for them to come to an agreement about a thing as a group, and that they didn't need someone to say yes or have that answer be directed to them top down. Once they were comfortable with that, they started to form and make policies around some of their subtasks. So things like, well, I can do that subtask, but we need at least 2 working days notice. And we embedded that in the digital ticket. So when the ticket is created, if they decided that they needed a policy that says, well, we need 2 days notice, we would embed that directly in the ticket. So it's created and the policy was right there.
Maybe Anthony, or I don't know who's next for
Yeah,
the
and
questions.
actually Anthony gave me the permission to read out in the chat because he apparently has some background noise. Or do you want to read it yourself, Pip?
My first reflection to the group was that the group didn't even know what work was on. Sorry, Anthony, I might need some more explanation.
So when you were talking about before how you had tickets all over the place, work coming out the ears, and like stuff everywhere, and it was all over the place. So you didn't know.
Yeah.
The first take is like, guys, we actually don't even know what's really on right now.
Ah, right. So it was all on people's heads. So if I've got 12 campaign owners, those 12 campaigners 100% knew exactly what needed to be delivered for themselves. So they knew they had, 3 campaigns for client X and 2 campaigns for client Y and what else was in the pipeline. But they were the only ones who knew it. They were the only ones who really knew the key dates or what was going on. They were supposed to be updating a spreadsheet that lived, fuck knows where the spreadsheet lived. So they were supposed to be updating a spreadsheet, but they were so busy they never had time to update a spreadsheet. Because they're busy, because they have to update this tool and they have to update that tool and they have to update this tool, and I'll just keep my own little list and notes. So that was what I mean by the true owner of the most accountable person for the delivery knew. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
No worries.
Dan.
Hello, kia ora.
Dan. Kia ora, Dan.
Hi, inspiring stuff. Thank you for sharing this work with us. You mentioned earlier in your talk that people were at capacity pretty much when you arrived. They were, 100% utilized just delivering. And they were open to change, but there's a sort of, when you're absolutely flat out, there's a pain with that. And the normal way to kind of relieve that pain is just to keep delivering. So what was it that motivated people to stop delivering and spend time paying attention to the changes that you were proposing? What was the journey that they went on?
I was very lucky. So again, loyalty has a great values system, a high trust environment. And so the question I said to the marketing, to some of the teams was, do they ever not get it done when you need? And they went, oh, okay, yeah, well, they always get it done. I said, so you trust them to always get it done when you need it? And they were like, yep. I said, so it doesn't really matter whether you schedule them 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever. The most important thing is that this particular step or this particular task or this particular ticket gets done by a particular date. And they all agreed yes. So I went back to the group that was receiving this and I went, what if I could make the hours go away? What if you guys just, excuse me, what if you people just hit those dates? They went, oh, that'd be awesome. I was like, great. So we leveraged the high trust that we had in the group. So they were unhappy because they had lots of things which added up to lots of hours, and we just took it away. I was pretty lucky in that the scheduling tool was costing us $1,000 a year. And somebody suggested, well, if we didn't use it, and I was like, well, so the stars were aligning in that perspective, in that respect. Does that answer your question, Dan?
You did say you were lucky about the high trust environment, but it also sounds like there was a real quick win just sitting right there. You could just make that cost and those hours go away. They weren't helping.
No, they weren't. I mean, like, to be fair, it was a 3-month project to get rid of the scheduling tool, and there was a whole series of steps that we had to go through. But it was a nice alignment. So look for the wins where you can. I am very fortunate at Loyalty. Loyalty is the best organization I've ever worked with. It's the most open and agile-minded and awesome culture place I've ever worked. And I come from 1,000 years in government where there's no money for anything, none. There's no money for everything, anything, and you have like one tool. So I got very good at using what I had and looking for opportunities, and I just leveraged that. Serge, you have your hand up.
Just one
Yes, I
thing
do.
from myself, Serge, sorry. Before
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so the meetup is actually scheduled for 2 hours, so until 8 o'clock. So we are well in time. I just wanted to say, if anybody feels like they need to drop off, do so. We will probably be earlier than 8 o'clock, but I like to schedule it in that way because we don't want to stop the good conversations and the learning together that we like to have just because we have a fixed end date. So if you need to drop off, do so. And we keep going with Serge here.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you mentioned that you had a couple of quick wins in your sleeve. I would add that I think you were very lucky in this environment to experience a lot of pain, because, you know, in any change, we should start with why, and the why seems to be very, very clear at that point, because there was a lot of pain, a lot of stuff that was costing a lot of money and time and everything. So yeah, pain is our ally when we try to change something. And I'm very curious about something. Did you have the chance at some point to say, ta-da, your people are now Kanban? Or did you not dare to do that?
Your second one. I haven't dared to do that. Doesn't that sound silly? I'm just going to unleash this presentation on them. No, I have not. I have not gone back and done that. We talk about it. Because Kanban is a method and because it can be applied to anything, and because this is a group of people that's very used to working in Jira, they're used to working in Jira now. And in Jira, you have a Scrum board or you have a Kanban board. And it's so difficult to get them out of that mindset, because one of the things they said early on, or the owner said earlier, was, oh, we're already doing Kanban. We've already got a Kanban board. Like, yeah. So there will be a whole presentation for them, which will be, ta-da, your Kanban. Yeah.
Nice. There was actually a question from Anthony. How often did you cop a drop everything and run campaign?
Again, Anthony, I don't understand. Is
And
that a
it's
type of
not.
campaign?
It's particularly contextual to the marketing environment. Basically, the key thing is a competitor drops a surprise on you in the market that you have to respond to and match, and you have to do it right now. And they call it a drop everything and run campaign.
Yeah. So really interestingly, we went through a series of workshops to determine language and to determine complexity and to determine the timelines for complexity. An example was a complex campaign will take 56 days. A standard campaign should take, off the top of my head, I think it was about 25 days. And when I went back, they agreed this, they went, yeah, that's our timeline. So I went back and I pulled all the metrics, which took ages, and I went, hey, did you know that for all of the campaigns you say are complex, your average cycle time is 17 days? They said it would take 56.
Because of the time compression. Yeah.
The complexity was well, it wasn't. It was the pressure of the time of the yeah. We called that out. Yeah. Yes.
And you're right. Language can be different. I was only replaying how it was described to me. But yeah.
No, that's fine. I spent a long time talking about campaigns that had been delivered. Is that campaign done? Has that campaign been delivered? And they would say yes. And that's not, and we didn't mean the same thing. To them, delivered meant deployed. And for me, delivered meant like all done. So we
they have an in-market state where it's in market until they're done, and once that's done, that's when the metrics on the effectiveness of the campaign turn up. And sometimes if it's one-to-one stuff, they can attribute it well, and if it's not one-to-one stuff, if it's spray and pray advertising, which hopefully it still happens, not so much anymore, then it doesn't happen. They really struggle to associate their campaign spend with the return. I'm seeing some nods, so I think someone totally gets the space. Yes.
Yeah.
I spent too long in it.
You run a campaign, and then you say whether it's nudged everything by 6 or 7% against the control.
Yeah.
And that could be months after campaigns run. Yeah.
So we had
some
a
bunch
really
of campaigns. I'll shut up. Sorry, Pip.
No, you're right. I was gonna you carry on.
No, I was done. Yeah.
So
David,
basically what we came up with was some language that said there is a deployed campaign, and then there is a completed campaign. So a deployed campaign means we've deployed it to the market, and a completed campaign means we've not only have we deployed it to the market, but we've done the post-campaign analysis effort, and we've gone back and talked to the client, and the client's, given their thumbs up. But in between a deployed campaign and a completed campaign is that promo fulfillment period, which could be weeks, it could be months, it could be hours or days. Yeah. So David asked, how long did it take me to learn their marketing domain so that I could interact and be effective in conversations? I'm still learning it. I haven't stopped. I would just learn enough to hold a conversation and learn what I didn't know, and then keep going and keep going. But to hold effective conversations like that, probably a good 6 months, 3 to 6 months, if not longer. Yeah. Cool. ABL and BTL. I'm just learning those ones.
Yeah. I've had 30 years experience in technology and product, and I joined a new company and they put me in a marketing team. So
Yeah.
I feel your
Yeah.
pain.
Great
Pip.
to have you here, Siggy, today.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
I
I
have
have no idea about marketing, and here I am.
There's all these neat terms: share of wallet. I've forgotten. There's a term they have for share of headspace, right? And then there's the overall funnel metrics about getting people aware of your brand and then like engage with your brand and they want to try something, and then it turns into a sales funnel. But yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's brand, but then you have acquisition marketers and retention marketers, and
David.
Yeah, just a comment or reflection for me is you're working with a marketing team, which is a silo in an organization, if you like, in terms of the work that they do. And I'm feeling lucky that one of the teams I'm working with has a marketing person in their team about with all the other folks that are in it. Because we're a small company anyway, it's a lot easier to sort of be organized like that. So just reflecting on that, thinking about what you've done here and how that might apply for that particular person, hence my interest in the marketing function, but then how does that all fit in with, and how does that with the team and like in the system we're looking at and go, my head explodes thinking about that, but that's okay. I'm enjoying the conversation and learning heaps.
Yeah, I say it was with one team, but it was really with 4 teams. So we have a team of analysts, and the analysts are divided into 2 subsets who work on campaigns for Group A or Group B. And then the marketing people are split into Group A and Group B. And we were very specifically just working with the A people, but we built the system so that it would work for the Group B people. And the Group B people were, because we built everything with them in mind and invited them to our workshops, they participated in everything, they just kind of rolled into the system. And yeah, it's been working quite well for them as well.
I love the fact that more and more teams come on board from outside this team as well. That's really my experience as well, because, you know, it's like, this is sort of success as well, I find, with the evolutionary change. If you roll like this is in a whole organization, it's like when teams come on board and ask you, hey, can we have this too, please? It's just so cool, isn't it?
It's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. Yeah.
And then there is buying, and you don't have to indoctrinate it on them.
Yeah. I kept people, so one of my mantras at work is, I know it's uncomfortable, just get comfortable with the fact it's uncomfortable. It won't get any worse than this. More constant change, and they were very adaptive to that, which is great.
Cool. Are there any more last questions? Otherwise, I will stop the recording and we couldn't still hang in here for some last things. Dan, did you want to maybe just for the recording do a...
I just wanted to say for Kanban Australia conference this year, it's in Sydney in October. So the details and things are in the link on the chat at the moment. So yeah, tickets are already available. There's a super early bird discount for those who want to get in there early. And the other thing is on Monday, we're going to open a call for proposals or submissions. So if you have a great talk or something you'd like to share, like Pip has done tonight, yeah, please submit a proposal for coming to the Kanban Australia conference.
And by the way, it's also for New Zealanders.
Yeah.
So that's just on the website for proposals, yeah?
Yeah, there's the main Kanban Australia website, and then there's the where we're using ConfEngine to manage all the proposals and stuff.
Brilliant.
And it's only a quick swim for New Zealanders, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you only call it Kanban Australia, they might not be appealed by it, though. That's why I'm always putting my foot in to say it's New Zealand as well. Come on, New Zealanders,
Yep.
come join us.
Kanban for Australia and New Zealand swimmers.
Exactly. Cool. I think I'll stop the recording here. But hang on here if you like.